Welcome to my channel. My name is Adina. I'm an intuitive astrologer. In this video, I will be going over some energies that Canada is moving through. Now, the chart that is on the screen at this moment is the chart for the solar eclipse we are having October 14th. So I will be pulling up a few charts going through the energies. Now, before we get started, I just want to mention that back in 2018 to 2020, so actually November 2018 to May of 2020, Canada had the North Node transiting its first house. We had the nodes in Cancer and Capricorn. The North Node was in Cancer. The South Node was in Capricorn. The nodes are very faded, very karmic energy. The North Node represents a direction we're moving into. It is something new showing up. The South Node represents an area of life we are releasing. There's a letting go involved with the South Node. So that really activated change for Canada. And so I wanted to mention that because I do think it's quite significant as we've seen, that all being activated the end of 2018 to 2020, there was a lot activated. Not only did we have the nodes moving through, the North Node moving through Canada's first house, which would have shown something new, a new direction Canada would be moving in, but we had Uranus enter Taurus in the 11th house of Canada's chart. Now, the 11th house represents social media, social groups, friends, how people connect to one another. That was also, there's been a shakeup in those areas. Wherever Uranus is transiting, Uranus is shaking that up. There can be sudden shakeups, especially when Uranus formed the conjunction to Pluto here. And we have seen a lot going on with social media, censorship, those types of things. That's a part of the Uranus in the 11th house. In Taurus, Uranus is going to be in Taurus until 2025. So we're not done with this transit yet. We are still moving through these energies and there will still be more to come. So I wanted to mention that. Now, April 2024, we're going to have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction here in the 11th house. That can really indicate major change and something really big showing up when it has to do with censorship, social media, and how people are connecting to one another. And that's April 2024. Now, right now, we have the lunar nodes transiting. These are the lunar nodes here. This is the North Node. This is the South Node. The lunar node, the North Node is transiting Canada's 10th house, and the South Node is transiting the 4th house. Now, in a country's chart, I look at the 10th house as government authority figures, also the country's reputation, and we can see a lot changing with Canada's reputation. Canada, and I also think that was activated too with that North Node in the first house, because that can also be the image of the country, how others perceive the country to be. And, people used to think Canada was a free country. It was the land of the free. People no longer think that when you watch certain interviews and just stuff on social media. A lot of people across the world don't believe that Canada is a free country. And I think it was activated here. And now with the North Node being in, it was activated with the North Node transiting. And then once the North Node entered the 10th house, it's really being amplified now. And that will continue to happen until we reach 2025, because we will have the North Node in the 10th house. I mean, we just had that incident in the House of Commons with, all of that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sure you can find it online. But Canada's reputation is going through it, and that's very much that North Node in the 10th house, and that will continue to be a thing. It'll be more that we're going through, and I will talk about the energies, of course, in later videos when other things are activated. But that is an energy that we are moving through and will continue to move through. Now, with the South Node being in the 4th house, and remember, the South Node is about releasing and letting something go. There's something we're moving out of with these themes and topics. The 4th house has to do with home, family, property, real estate, housing. And so in a country's chart, this can have to do with, real estate, right? Housing crisis. There's a lot going on here. There's going to be a lot shifting in those areas as well. Even the family unit, we can see a lot going on in the world. There's a lot of disagreements, right? And so there's definitely going to be a lot of changes in those areas. What is a family, even with the parents, right? We're seeing a lot of parents standing up and protesting for what is going on in the schools. That is going to continue to happen with the South Node in the fourth house. Now, if we look at the time of this, oh, wait, there was one more thing I wanted to mention before we get into the chart. Saturn being in Pisces until 2026. Saturn's going to be moving through this area of Canada's chart, bringing in. Now, Saturn is Canada's most malefic planet because of the sun being below the eastern horizon. This can really indicate change, and not necessarily great change, right? It's Saturn, but there's change when it has to do with the school system, learning, teaching, traveling, all of those ninth house themes and topics. And we are seeing that. Now, Saturn entered Pisces back in March of 2023. I think that it was all amplified when Saturn entered Pisces in Canada's ninth house. There's a lot of changes going on with the school system. There's a lot of changes with traveling. There's a lot of changes with the teachers and the curriculum. And that's going to continue to be a thing while Saturn is transiting the ninth house. Now, if we get into the energy for the solar eclipse now, which is happening at 21 degrees of Libra right here in Canada's fourth house. Now, these are energies that are going to play out. Whatever is triggered and activated at this time, whatever is showing up, these are energies that will play out over the next year while we have the nodes in Aries and Libra. So there's something here around home, family, housing, real estate. There's energies coming in. This can be information too, news, because of that Mercury energy there. There can be something coming in that we hear about housing, about real estate, about parents, the family, right? How families can connect, the responsibility of the parents and all of that that's going on. There can be more around that. And there's going to be something that is going to be released and let go of, something we're moving out of when it has to do with those themes and topics. And it's all showing up now and will play out over the next year to year and a half. Now, the ruler of this solar eclipse is Venus. Venus is conjunct Mars, Canada's natal Mars. And Mars rules the 10th house. So there's also something really big coming in that has to do with government, authority figures like police, military, also the the reputation of Canada. So there is also something showing up more. There's more happening with this, with the government and everything kind of going on. There's something big really coming in, I think, with this. Now, also, too, the moon is Canada's chart ruler, and the sun being also a key player, right? The moon, where it's a new moon solar eclipse, and in every new moon and full moon, we have the sun and the moon, as key players. The moon being Canada's chart ruler, the sun being the ruler of Canada's second house of money, finances, banking, inflation. There can be more with that as well, I think, that can be activated. The interesting thing too is that we've had Venus in Leo, so we haven't heard too much. Venus is Canada's benefic planet, and Venus, at the time of this chart, Venus is going to be in Virgo, but Venus has been transiting Leo since June to October 8th. She moves into Virgo October 8th. And while Venus has been in the second house, I don't think we've seen too much with inflation, the money, the banking, the financial systems, and all of that. I think it's kind of taken a back seat. Mind you, I could be wrong. If I am, comment below, because I don't know everything going on in the news, but it does seem a little bit quiet when it has to do with those areas, right? We haven't heard too much recently the last couple of months. Well, I think that can change now. We will have Venus out of the second house, the sun being a key player in this solar eclipse and ruling that second house. I think we can start to hear more about inflation again, more about how they want to change the money, the banking systems, and all of that, I think can really be activated with this solar eclipse as well. Now, one more energy I want to go over in this chart before we move on to the next chart is that there's an in conjunction with this solar eclipse to Uranus here at 22 degrees of Taurus. So there, and an in conjunction is when there is something not aligning well. There's healing is really required, and there's basically the energies here are not aligned with the energies here. And how I see this, because Uranus is in Canada's 11th house, which is how people connect, socializing, social media, online. There can be something implemented with something triggered and activated. And when it has to do with how people are connecting, and it can be quite sudden, how people are socializing, connecting to one another. It can also have to do with social media, online, more censorship, stuff like that. It's definitely a thing that can be activated and triggered with this energy. So now let's pull up the chart for the lunar eclipse in Taurus. Okay, so here's the chart for the lunar eclipse in Taurus, October 28th. This is happening in Canada's 11th house, again, of social media, online connections, networking, how people are socializing and connecting to one another. So these areas and these themes and topics are being highlighted this month with these eclipses. Now, the one thing that really stood out to me was in the last chart with the solar eclipse. Now, Venus is the ruler of both eclipses this month. And so Venus is a key player all month. Venus does rule money, finances. And when we're talking about a country, I mean, these energies are showing up a lot different for our own individual lives. And for a country, they're going to show up more so with, money and finances and all of that. And then depending on how it's kind of falling in the chart. But I've talked a lot about how Venus is a big key player, and a lot of people will be moving through a lot of relationship stuff this month. But with Canada, Venus was conjunct Mars in the last chart with the solar eclipse. Now Venus is conjunct Canada's North Node. Again, activating change when it has to do with the direction that Canada is moving in. So I thought that was interesting that, there's a lot going on here when it has to do with the direction that Canada is moving in as a whole. Now, Venus is also forming a sextile to Canada's natal Saturn, and there's Mars here. There's all this energy here in Scorpio. Canada has Saturn retrograde in Scorpio. So there can be something showing up here when it has to do with the people, right? Saturn does rule Canada's 7th house of people, relationships, personal connections. And also too, when we're looking at the country, I find the people reside in the 11th house and the 7th house, the people of the country, right? And so something can really be activated here, maybe more protests because of the Mercury Mars energy on top of the Saturn. I mean, there can definitely be a lot more protests about children because it is in the 5th house of children. This lunar eclipse is also forming a square to Canada's natal Mercury, which I really feel like this can really indicate that we can be hearing something on the news. There can be something implemented at this time. We are hearing some type of information that is not necessarily favorable because it is a square. It can have to do with money and finances because the Mercury being in the 2nd house, but it could also have to do with censorship, because of the square here to the 11th house. It can have to do with the whole parents protesting about the children because of the 5th house energy. And also, I wanted to so I should have mentioned this in the last chart, because October 7th we are going to have a square between Mars and Pluto. At that point, at that time, Mars is still here in Libra, and it's at 25 degrees, and this can really trigger. And remember, Mars is the ruler of that 10th house of government, authority figures, um public reputation of Canada, or the reputation of Canada. And there can be something else triggered. There can be something else showing up. It can be quite powerful and very intense because of the Pluto energy. This is October 7th. So if you're watching this, I'm recording this video October 3rd. So if you're watching this video, before the eclipse is October 7th, there is a Mars Pluto square that is going to be very intense, and that can definitely trigger rising of the people, because it's that 7th house and all of that. But also it's the government. And when we're talking about Pluto and Mars connecting, Mars can separate, Mars can sever things. Mars is also about anger, aggression, and conflict. Pluto is very deep, very intense. Pluto can also represent power and control. I mean, this can show up as something being implemented, or hearing about something being implemented that has to do with power and control, like the government putting power on the people, controlling the people, something along those lines. So we do want to watch for that. We want to watch to see if there's anything coming out on the news. Now, I also thought that I would do a lunar return. I would pull a lunar return chart for Canada, because this really gives us an idea of the energy Canada is moving through over the next month. So I'm going to pull up the chart for Canada's lunar return, and we can go through that, because I thought it was quite interesting. And also, Canada is just going to be starting a brand new lunar cycle. So this will really give us an idea of the energies we're moving through over the next month. Okay, so here's the lunar return for Canada, and Canada's lunar return starts October 5th. And so I'm recording this October 3rd. And so I thought this was a really great kind of thing to bring up or present, because this is something we are just coming into, and this is going to give us some ideas of the current energies and the energies we will be moving through over the next month. And a lunar return is when the moon comes back to the exact same spot in the sky as the time of the birth of the chart. And so in this chart, it really shows we have the ascendant in Canada's 6th house. So this really shows that 6th house themes and topics are going to be front and center for the next month. 6th house themes and topics are health, healthcare, daily routines, employees. This is all 6th house themes and topics. And so the routines of people are going to be front and center and possibly changed. Health and healthcare can be front and center. So there can be things showing up around health and the healthcare system. If we turn this, the ascendant is in Sagittarius. So the moon is in Canada's 8th house. This is a challenging house. So the moon of the lunar return chart is right here in the 8th house. Now, Canada has Aquarius in the 8th house. Aquarius rules the people, the collective. Aquarius in the 11th house are very similar. So there's a lot of focus on changes day to day with the collective, with the people, how we are connecting, our daily routines. There's going to be a lot. It'll kind of be front and center. Those are themes and topics that we will be moving through. And also, this is 2 days before we have Mars forming that square to Pluto, which is very intense, which is definitely triggering something with the government, which I was talking about, that power and control being implemented on the people, that this can be a thing, and it absolutely can show up in this way, where there's power put on the people. There's something showing up. We can be hearing about something at this time. We have Mercury in the midheaven conjunct. It's we can definitely be hearing a lot of news. There can definitely be a lot of changes going on with our daily routine, with our health and healthcare. We're going to see a lot of that. It's going to be front and center. Also, keep in mind that in the lunar return chart, Sagittarius is the ascendant, and Jupiter is currently retrograde. And Jupiter is again up here in the 11th house, which has to do with the people, the collective, how we are connecting. So there's a lot with 11th house themes and topics and 6th house themes and topics and the government. And at the same time, having that square between Mars and Pluto. So there's definitely some intense energy that can be showing up. There can be some intense information coming out that we want to watch for. So I hope this helps you get an idea of some energies that us Canadians will be moving through and kind of the direction Canada is moving in currently. Let me know in the comments below if this helps you or if you have any questions. I will be posting another video as well. I'm always kind of giving little updates on the direction Canada is moving in. I may even do a separate video going into JT's chart and what's going on with all that. Let me know in the comments below if you would like me to do that. And thank you so much for joining me, and I will connect with you all in the next one.